The billionaire's mute son shocked everyone when he finally spoke, and his words shattered his father's image. He wasn't sick. He had been kept silent by sedatives, cameras, and a millionaire's lie. He spoke to save the only person who ever treated him with real love, the maid everyone had accused. In front of the cameras, he revealed, "My father silenced me for years, but today he will be the one to listen." The Alcott Mansion was a monument to wealth and power in the heart of Bel Air, Los Angeles. Its impeccable gardens, with royal palms and carefully pruned jacaranda trees, concealed a glass and concrete fortress that seemed to float above the city. Viewed from the outside, the residence was the materialization of the American dream, proof that a man from humble beginnings could conquer the world with determination and intelligence. Bernard Alcott, 52, was the most photographed face of the national business elite. A man who had built a technology empire from scratch and who, over the past 5 years, had become the image of American philanthropy. His face appeared in advertising campaigns, talk shows, and on the front page of business magazines. But nothing attracted more attention and emotion than his appearances alongside his son, Raphael. And it was when the doctor said that Raphael would never speak or hear normally that I understood my true purpose in life. Bernard discreetly wiped away a tear as he gave an exclusive interview for Dateline. The reporter, Denise Harper, could barely hide her emotion. "I transformed my pain into purpose. The Silent Voices Foundation has already helped more than 5,000 children with conditions similar to my son's." The cameras captured the 10-year-old boy sitting next to his father. Raphael had large, expressive eyes, neatly combed brown hair, and wore clothes that seemed straight out of a children's fashion catalogue. He smiled shyly when his father ran a hand through his hair, but something in his gaze seemed distant, as if he were somewhere else. "And what about the experimental therapy in Boston?" "There are rumors it will cost millions," the reporter asked. "For a father, there is no price when it comes to his child's health," Bernard replied, his voice choked. "The therapy may finally give Raphael the chance to communicate normally. We will hold a fundraising event next month. Every penny will go to research that can help not only Raphael, but thousands of American children." When the cameras turned off, Bernard's expression subtly changed. The affectionate smile gave way to a serious, almost cold look. "Excellent. I think we got what we needed," he said to his assistant, who was frantically typing on a tablet. "Ensure the press release reaches all important outlets today." Behind the scenes of the mansion, a woman watched everything intently. Iris Sullivan, 54, had worked as a housekeeper for the Alcotts for 7 years, since Raphael was just 3 years old. Born in rural Kansas, with hands calloused from decades of hard work, Iris carried the marks of a challenging life on her face, but her eyes held the vivacity and shrewdness that had always characterized her. As she discreetly tidied the room after the interview, Iris noticed how Raphael visibly relaxed when his father stepped away to answer a call. The boy looked at her with an intensity that always intrigued her. There seemed to be a silent plea in those eyes, something she couldn't fully decipher. "I'll take him upstairs now," announced Dr. Maurice Fontaine, the private physician who attended Raphael daily. The man in the white coat and impassive expression held the boy firmly by the shoulder. "It's time for his treatment." Iris saw Raphael's body stiffen instantly. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to those not paying attention, but to her, who observed the boy daily, it was a clear sign of discomfort. "Can I help take him, doctor?" Iris offered, approaching. "Raphael is always calmer when I'm around." The doctor hesitated for a moment, but Bernard, returning from his call, intervened. "That won't be necessary. Iris, Dr. Maurice knows exactly what to do." "Yes, sir," she replied, stepping back, but not before exchanging one last glance with Raphael. The boy seemed to want to say something, his eyes almost pleading, but he was led out of the room before any communication could happen. "Iris," Bernard called, now alone with the housekeeper. "Always remember that we have strict protocols for Raphael's treatment. I know you've grown fond of the boy, but trust the professionals I've hired. They know what's best for his condition." "Of course, Mr. Alcott," she replied, maintaining a neutral expression. "I just want to help." "And you help a great deal," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That's why I trust you to respect the house rules. Raphael needs stability and routine for the treatment to work." Iris merely nodded, returning to her duties as Bernard left the room. Alone, she allowed herself a deep sigh. There was something in the dynamic between father and son that deeply bothered her. Small details that accumulated over the years formed a disturbing picture. Upstairs in Raphael's room, the walls were thick and soundproof. The decor, though luxurious, had something impersonal about it, like a five-star hotel room devoid of personality or affection. A discreet camera in the corner of the ceiling silently rotated, monitoring the movements in the room. Dr. Maurice prepared a syringe with a translucent liquid, while Raphael sat on the bed, looking out the window at the garden. "This will make you feel better, Raphael," the doctor said mechanically, approaching with the syringe. "As always, it won't hurt." The boy didn't protest. He never protested. He just turned his face away when the needle penetrated his arm. Minutes later, his eyes began to feel heavy, the world around him hazy and distant. Meanwhile, in the mansion's main office, Bernard was talking with Caroline Vance, his lawyer and right hand in business. "The fundraising event needs to surpass last year's," he said, examining charts on his laptop. "The story about the Boston therapy is doing well in the media. Donations have already increased by 30% since we announced it." "And what about the foundation's audit?" Caroline asked, adjusting her thin-rimmed glasses. "The board is asking for more transparency in spending." "You know how to handle it," Bernard replied without taking his eyes off the screen. "Do as you did last time. Edited documents, adjusted numbers, the usual." In the kitchen, Iris prepared a tea, lost in thought. She remembered the day she was hired, when Raphael was just a 3-year-old boy. He spoke normally then, albeit little, short sentences typical of a child his age. She remembered his smile, the small conversations they had while playing in the garden. And then, gradually, Raphael stopped speaking. First, there were explanations about an ear infection, then consultations with specialists. Finally, the diagnosis of a rare and progressive neurological condition affecting his hearing and speech. The cheerful boy gave way to a silent, medicated, and isolated child. Iris never openly questioned it. After all, who was she to doubt doctors and specialists? But the maternal instinct she had developed over decades told her that there was something wrong with that story. Something profoundly wrong. On the mansion's balcony, as the sun began to set behind the Los Angeles skyscrapers, Iris made a silent promise to the wind. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. What she didn't know was that soon, that promise would forever change the destiny of everyone in that house. The day at the Alcott mansion always began at 6 in the morning, with military precision. Iris arrived even before sunrise, prepared breakfast and supervised the other staff members as they began to arrive. The house functioned like a Swiss watch, every gear in its place, every movement carefully timed. At 8 o'clock, Dr. Maurice entered Raphael's room for the day's first medication. The boy was usually awake, sitting on the bed, looking out at the garden through the window. It was the only time the curtains were fully open, allowing sunlight to flood the artificially sterilized environment. That April morning, as Iris arranged the boy's breakfast tray, something caught her attention. On the hallway table near Raphael's room, there was an open folder with documents. It was unusual to find important papers outside Bernard's office, as he was almost obsessive about organization and security. Approaching discreetly, she saw the heading of a document, the Silent Voices Foundation, International Transfer. Below were numbers, many numbers, followed by figures that made her eyes widen. Millions being transferred to offshore accounts under the pretext of payments for the supposed experimental therapy. "What are you doing, Iris?" The voice made her heart leap. It was Roderick, the mansion's chief of security, a burly man with small, suspicious eyes. "Just tidying up to take Raphael's breakfast." "Roderick," she replied, stepping away from the table naturally. "Good morning to you too." Roderick narrowed his eyes, quickly approaching to close the folder. "You know you shouldn't pay attention to Mr. Alcott's documents." "Of course I apologize," she said with a forced smile. "It was unintentional." The security guard watched her as she proceeded down the corridor with the tray. Iris felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't the first time she had noticed the man observing her movements with suspicion. Entering Raphael's room, she found Dr. Maurice adjusting medical equipment. The boy was sitting in an armchair, electrodes connected to his head. "We're in the middle of a procedure, Iris," the doctor said without looking directly at her. "Leave the tray and come back later." Raphael, however, turned his face toward her. His eyes, normally clouded by the effects of medication, seemed strangely alert that morning. For a brief moment, Iris had the impression of seeing a flicker of recognition, almost a plea, before the boy looked away again. "I'll come back later then," she said, leaving the tray on the side table. As she left, she cast one last glance back and saw something that intrigued her. Raphael had discreetly moved his hand, pointing downwards to the floor under his bed. Throughout the rest of the morning, Iris couldn't get that image out of her head. What could Raphael be trying to show? Or was it just her imagination, fueled by growing suspicions? In the afternoon, when she finally had an opportunity to return to the room to change the bed linens, she found it empty. Raphael was in his special therapy session with Dr. Maurice in the treatment room at the end of the corridor, a room that remained locked to everyone except the doctor, Bernard, and the nurse, Teresa. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Iris looked at the floor under Raphael's bed. At first she saw nothing special, just the impeccably clean floor. But then, bending lower, she noticed a small scratch on the floorboard, as if something had been recently dragged. Following her instinct, she lightly pressed the area and felt something give way. A small floorboard was removable, revealing an improvised hiding place. Inside, she found a notebook with children's drawings and, to her surprise, a small old digital recorder. "My God," she whispered to herself, her heart pounding. With trembling hands, she quickly hid the recorder in her apron pocket and replaced the floorboard. She didn't have time to examine the contents there. Someone could walk in at any moment. During dinner that night, Bernard hosted important guests at the mansion. The State Secretary of Health, 2 senators, and a pharmaceutical executive dined while discussing partnerships for the Silent Voices Foundation. The specialized clinic project is ambitious. "Bernard," the secretary commented, savoring an expensive red wine. "But with the tax incentives we managed to approve, it will be a milestone in American public health. And how much will it yield for us?" one of the senators asked, lowering his voice as a waiter moved away. Bernard smiled discreetly. "The numbers are in the project I sent privately. Let's just say we'll all be very satisfied with this partnership." Iris, who was serving dessert, remained impassive, as if hearing nothing. Years of working in wealthy households had taught her to be invisible when necessary. But every word was carefully registered in her memory. Later that night, locked in her small maid's room at the back of the property, Iris finally gathered the courage to examine the recorder. She pressed the play button, her heart pounding. At first, she only heard indistinct noises, distant conversations poorly captured by the small device. But then a clearer recording emerged. It was Bernard's voice, likely captured from a conversation in the corridor near Raphael's room. "The false report is ready. If anyone questions it, we have 3 specialists confirming the diagnosis. Is the boy still receiving the necessary doses to maintain appearances? We cannot risk him showing any sudden improvement." Iris covered her mouth with her hands to stifle a scream. Her darkest suspicions were beginning to be confirmed. Raphael had no neurological condition at all. He was being kept in an artificial state of incapacity. But why? What did Bernard gain from this? The answer came in the next recording. The Foundation's numbers exceeded all expectations. International donations reached 12 million this quarter. The operation in the Caribbean is working perfectly for the transfers. Now everything began to make sense. The Silent Voices Foundation was a front for money laundering. And Raphael, a perfectly healthy boy, was the central piece of this cruel charade. The next morning, Iris looked at Raphael with new eyes. During breakfast, when no one else was around, she approached him and whispered, "I know what's happening, Raphael. I'm going to help you." The boy showed no immediate reaction. The effects of the morning medication had already begun. But for a brief instant, before his eyes became hazy again, Iris saw a glimmer of hope in his gaze. Over the following weeks, Iris began to investigate discreetly. She photographed documents with her cell phone when she had the chance, noted suspicious conversations, and observed Raphael's medication routine. She discovered that the boy received 3 daily injections of a cocktail of sedatives and neural blockers that temporarily affected his cognitive and motor abilities. creating all the symptoms of the supposed condition. Meanwhile, Raphael, in moments of lucidity between medications, continued to collect evidence with his small recorder. Somehow the boy had developed resistance to the drugs, or perhaps he had found a way not to ingest them completely. His consciousness emerged in flashes, allowing him to document the horrors of his own imprisonment. Iris's plan was to gather enough evidence and then seek outside help, perhaps a trustworthy journalist or a public prosecutor. But fate had other plans. One night, returning to her room after work, she found her door ajar. Someone had rummaged through her belongings. The recorder, which she had kept hidden inside a false lining in an old bag, had disappeared. The next morning she was called to Bernard's office. The businessman awaited her with a grim expression, accompanied by Roderick and Caroline, the lawyer. "Iris," Bernard began, his voice controlled. "We have worked together for many years. I trusted you to take care of my home and my son." She remained silent, feeling her heart pound against her chest. "That's why I'm deeply disappointed," he continued, placing an envelope on the table. "We know you accessed confidential company and foundation documents. And worse, we found this in your room." Roderick placed the recorder on the table. Iris felt her blood run cold. "You betrayed my trust, invaded my privacy, and, even more seriously, interfered with my son's medical treatment," Bernard accused, his voice now laden with contained anger. "This is criminal, Iris." "I did no such thing, Mr. Alcott," she defended herself, trying to maintain composure. "That recorder isn't mine. I've never seen it before." "Spare us the lies," Caroline interrupted coldly. "We have enough evidence for a criminal case. Violation of confidentiality, invasion of private property, interference with the medical treatment of an incapacitated minor." Iris felt the world spin around her. It was her word against theirs, a completely unequal battle. "You are fired, obviously," Bernard declared, "and you are forbidden to approach this house or my son again. If you attempt any contact, if you speak to the press or anyone about this family's affairs, the consequences will be severe." "And Raphael?" Iris asked, her voice trembling. "What you are doing to that boy is inhumane." Bernard smiled coldly. "Raphael receives the best medical care money can buy. His condition is monitored by the country's top specialists. Your delusional accusations only prove that you are not in a mental state to continue working here." 2 hours later, Iris left the Alcott mansion for the last time, carrying only a suitcase with her personal belongings. At the gate, she felt the weight of the security camera's gaze following her every step. But what no one saw was the small piece of paper, meticulously folded, hidden in the inner seam of her bag. A note written in shaky child's handwriting that she had discreetly found tucked among her clothes. A note from Raphael. Iris's small apartment in Queens, New York City, was an absolute contrast to the Alcott mansion. Simple furniture, walls that needed a fresh coat of paint, noisy neighbors, but there was something the mansion had never had: freedom. Sitting at the kitchen table, under the yellowish light of an old lamp, Iris unfolded Raphael's note again, studying every word written in that shaky child's handwriting. "Mrs. Iris, help me. I'm not sick." "He's lying. There are more recordings hidden in the Blue Bear. They're taking me away on the 20th, please." Tears blurred her vision as she read and reread the desperate plea. The boy had found enough strength and lucidity to write that note, even under the influence of the drugs administered to him daily. What did "they're taking me away" mean? And what day was it today? May 15th. Only 5 days remained. Iris knew she had to act quickly, but she felt powerless against Bernard Alcott's power and influence. Who would believe a dismissed housekeeper against one of the country's most respected businessmen, a philanthropist celebrated by the media, and an example of a devoted father? The next day, gathering all her courage, Iris went to the only place where she imagined she could find help: the office of Dr. Victoria Peterson, a pediatric neurologist who, years earlier, had treated Raphael when the first symptoms began to appear. The waiting room was full, but Iris insisted to the receptionist that she needed to speak with the doctor urgently. After almost 2 hours of waiting, she was finally led into the office. "Mrs. Sullivan, isn't it?" The receptionist said it was an urgent matter concerning Raphael Alcott, the doctor commented, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and an attentive gaze. "Yes, doctor." It's about Raphael, Iris confirmed, nervously twisting the fabric of her bag. So you treated him a few years ago, when they started saying he had neurological problems. Dr. Victoria nodded, her face taking on a more serious expression. Yes, I remember the case. A very sad situation. But why are you here? I understand the boy is being treated by a specialized team now. Because there is no illness, doctor, Iris blurted out, unable to restrain herself. Raphael is being kept drugged to feign a condition he doesn't have. I have proof. The doctor's eyes widened for an instant before her expression closed into professional distrust. That is a very serious accusation, madam. Are you sure of what you are saying? Absolutely, Iris replied, and then she told everything, the recordings, the documents she had seen, Raphael's note, the conversations she had overheard in the mansion. She spoke about how the boy was perfectly normal at 3 years old, how he had gradually been silenced, how the symptoms seemed to vary according to the administration of medications. The doctor listened in silence, her face transitioning between disbelief, shock, and finally concern. If what you are saying is true, we are facing a very serious case of child abuse, she finally said. That's why I came to you, Iris explained. You are respected, you have credibility. I need you to examine Raphael to confirm that he doesn't have this so-called syndrome. Dr. Victoria sighed deeply. It's not that simple, Mrs. Sullivan. I can't just show up at the mansion and demand to examine the boy. Bernard Alcott has powerful connections and without concrete evidence. But I have Raphael's note, Iris exclaimed, desperate. A handwritten note without witnesses is not enough proof in a case of this magnitude, the doctor patiently explained. We need more. Independent medical examinations, confirmation that the medications are not necessary. Iris felt the weight of despair on her shoulders. And how will we get that if we can't even get near Raphael? The doctor reflected for a few moments. Perhaps there is a way. St. Jude's Hospital will hold a charity event for children with rare diseases on Saturday. The Silent Voices Foundation is one of the sponsors. It's likely that Bernard will bring Raphael, as he always does at these public events. And how does that help us? Iris asked, confused. I am one of the event coordinators, Dr. Victoria explained, a small smile forming on her lips. I can arrange for Raphael to undergo a demonstrative checkup as part of the program. Something public that Bernard cannot refuse without appearing suspicious. For the first time in days, Iris felt a glimmer of hope. Meanwhile, at the Alcott mansion, Raphael was undergoing a silent transformation. Since he had started hiding some of the medications, discreetly spitting them into napkins or hiding pills under his tongue, his mind was gradually returning to clarity. Alone in his room, during the hours when surveillance relaxed, the boy exercised his voice. First there were whispers, disconnected sounds after years of forced silence. Then simple words, water, help, home. Finally, complete sentences, spoken into the emptiness of his room when he was sure no one was listening. My name is Raphael Alcott. I am 10 years old. I am not sick. Each word was a small victory, each sentence an act of rebellion against the silent prison imposed upon him. Along with his voice, he also recovered his memories, fragments of childhood before the silence, memories of Iris telling stories, recollections of a time when he ran through the garden without fear. Raphael had also developed a technique to temporarily deactivate the surveillance camera in his room. By carefully observing the maintenance pattern performed by the monthly technician, he had learned to identify the system's weak point. A pen with a moistened tip, applied to the correct spot on the exposed wiring near his headboard, caused a temporary short circuit that shut down the camera for approximately 20 minutes, enough time for his small investigations. It was during one of these intervals that he found, hidden in a false folder inside Dr. Maurice's personal computer, the true medical reports, not those presented publicly, but those detailing the cocktail of medications administered daily, their side effects, dosages, and objectives, maintenance of apparent deficiency, cognitive control, speech inhibition. That night, as the mansion slept, Raphael used his small spare recorder, which Iris didn't know about, hidden inside the blue bear mentioned in the note, to record his own voice for the first time in years. My name is Raphael Alcott. I am not deaf. I do not have any syndrome. My father keeps me drugged to pretend I am sick. He steals money from donations, He is planning to take me out of the country to a clinic where no one will be able to find me. Please, someone help me." The recording was clear, articulate, the voice of a 10-year-old boy perfectly capable of communicating. On Saturday, as planned, Dr. Victoria managed to include Raphael in the neurological examination demonstration program during the charity event. Bernard, unable to refuse an opportunity for positive public exposure for the foundation, consented, although he insisted that Dr. Maurice accompany the entire procedure. "It's just an educational demonstration," Dr. Victoria explained with a professional smile. "We will show those present how basic neurological evaluations work. Raphael will be our special volunteer." Under the watchful eyes of the audience, doctors, sponsors, patients' families, and journalists, the doctor conducted a battery of simple but revealing tests. Responses to visual and auditory stimuli, reflexes, pattern recognition. To the public, it was just an interesting demonstration. To the doctor, it was a crucial investigation. Dr. Maurice remained by the boy's side the entire time, smiling tensely at the cameras. But his eyes betrayed growing concern as the tests progressed. "Raphael is doing surprisingly well today," Dr. Victoria commented, with false casualness. "His responses to auditory stimuli are almost normal." "He has good days and bad days," Dr. Maurice quickly explained. "The syndrome causes unpredictable fluctuations in his condition." "Fascinating," she replied, maintaining an educational tone for the audience. "And what medications is he currently receiving?" The question, seemingly innocent in the context of the demonstration, made Dr. Maurice visibly hesitate. "A personalized protocol," he answered evasively. "I can provide you with the details later, in private." "Of course," Dr. Victoria smiled before turning back to Raphael. "Now let's do a simple verbal response test." At that moment, Dr. Morris intervened. "Unfortunately, Raphael does not respond to complex verbal commands. His condition—" "Just a basic test," the doctor insisted, smiling for the cameras. "For educational purposes." Then, bending down to Raphael's height, she asked clearly, "Raphael, can you point to the light above us?" The boy hesitated for an instant. His eyes, more alert than usual thanks to his self-imposed reduction in medication, moved quickly between Dr. Victoria and Dr. Maurice. Then, slowly, he raised his arm and pointed to the chandelier on the ceiling. A murmur of approval swept through the audience. Bernard, who was observing closely, quickly approached. "I think we've demonstrated enough," he said, with a tense smile for the cameras. "Raphael must be tired." But Dr. Victoria had already gotten what she wanted. During the brief moments she had examined the boy, she had discreetly collected a saliva sample and observed his pupillary reflexes, signs that no layperson could interpret, but which, for an experienced neurologist, told a very different story from the rare syndrome that supposedly afflicted him. "I thank Raphael for his participation," she said, addressing the audience. "It's inspiring to see how, despite challenges, children like him can surprise us with their abilities." At the end of the event, while Bernard spoke with sponsors, Dr. Victoria discreetly approached Iris, who was observing everything from a distance. "We need to talk," the doctor whispered. "Today, what you told me seems to be true. And there's something else. I believe they are reducing Raphael's medication dosage so they can transport him. A completely sedated body would raise suspicion at immigration. What can we do?" Iris asked, her heart racing. "I'm taking the sample for immediate analysis at a trusted lab," the doctor explained. "With luck, we'll have results today. Meanwhile, we need to find a way to access Raphael's room, retrieve that recorder you mentioned." "Impossible," Iris replied, disheartened. "The mansion's security is impenetrable, especially now that I've been dismissed." Dr. Victoria thought for a moment. "Perhaps we don't need to get in. Perhaps Raphael can bring the recorder to us." "How?" "The Foundation is holding another event on Tuesday at Bernard's company headquarters," the doctor explained. "An exclusive dinner for major donors. Raphael will certainly be present, as always. If we can get an invitation." "And how would we do that?" "I have my contacts," the doctor smiled. "And more importantly, we have 2 days to prepare a plan." That night, as the city of Los Angeles slept under a fine drizzle, 3 people in different parts of the city were making plans that would change their lives forever. Iris, in her small apartment, organizing every piece of evidence she had managed to gather. Dr. Victoria, in her private lab, analyzing samples that would prove the absence of any neurological condition in Raphael, and Raphael himself, who that night took none of his medications, discreetly spitting them into a handkerchief when no one was watching. For the first time in years, the boy slept without the chemical fog that blurred his thoughts. And he dreamed of freedom, of a normal life, of the right to speak, to run, to simply be a child. The clock advanced inexorably towards Tuesday, the day the silence would finally be broken. The Alcott Technologies headquarters occupied an entire skyscraper on Wall Street, New York City's financial heart. That Tuesday night, the 30th floor had been transformed into a luxurious ballroom for the Silent Voices Foundation's charity dinner. Arrangements of white orchids decorated the tables. White-gloved waiters served champagne in crystal flutes, and a small orchestra played soft classical music in the background. Dr. Victoria Peterson circulated deftly among the guests, wearing an elegant navy blue dress. As a respected neurologist and a member of the advisory board of several research institutions, her presence caused no surprise. No one noticed that in her purse was a small recording device and that her eyes were constantly attentive to the movements in the room. "Dr. Peterson, what a pleasure to have you with us tonight." Bernard Alcott's voice made the doctor turn with a professional smile on her lips. The businessman was impeccable in his Italian suit, with Raphael beside him, formally dressed like a small adult. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Alcott," she replied, greeting him with a firm handshake. "And how is our young Raphael? I was impressed with his participation in Saturday's demonstration." Bernard's eyes held a calculating glint behind his cordial smile. "He has his good moments, Doctor. As we know, cases like his are full of ups and downs." "Certainly," she agreed, bending down to Raphael's height. "Hello, Raphael. Do you remember me from the hospital?" The boy nodded slightly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that would surprise anyone who believed the narrative of his condition. Dr. Victoria noticed something crucial. The boy's pupils were normal, reactive, a sign that he had the least possible medication in his system. "Dr. Peterson, would you like to meet some of our international sponsors?" Bernard offered, clearly trying to draw her away from Raphael. "I'm sure they would appreciate speaking with a specialist of your caliber." "It would be a pleasure," she replied, before adding, "But first, if you'll allow me a professional moment, I noticed Raphael seems especially alert tonight. Is he on a new medication protocol?" The question, seemingly innocent, made Bernard stiffen almost imperceptibly. "We adjust some doses for social events," he explained with studied nonchalance. "It facilitates his interaction with the environment, however limited." "Fascinating approach," she commented. "I would very much like to discuss these protocols with Dr. Maurice at some point. For research purposes, of course." "Of course," Bernard replied dryly. "Now if you'll accompany me." As she was led away, Dr. Victoria cast a last glance at Raphael, making a discreet gesture with her hand. She quickly touched the side pocket of her dress and then subtly pointed to the boy's own jacket pocket. Raphael understood the message. Elsewhere in the city, Iris waited anxiously in a cafe near Manhattan Civil Court. She had arranged to meet Patricia Miller, a young public defender, specializing in children's and adolescents' rights. Recommended by an old employer of Iris's, Patricia had a reputation for being tenacious and incorruptible, exactly what they needed. "Mrs. Iris?" asked a woman of about 35, her curly hair pulled back in a bun, wearing a simple but well-tailored suit. "Yes, that's me," Iris replied, standing to greet her. The lawyer sat down, placing a folder on the table. "First of all, I want you to know that everything we discuss here is confidential. But I also need to be clear. What you allege in your message is extremely serious and involves a powerful public figure." "I know that," Iris replied firmly. "That's why I came to you. We need someone who isn't intimidated by power and money." A small smile appeared on Patricia's lips. "Well, you've come to the right place then. Now tell me everything from the beginning, without omitting any detail." Over the next hour, Iris recounted the entire story: her work at the Alcott mansion, the initial suspicions, the discovered recorder, Raphael's note, the unjust dismissal, the findings with Dr. Victoria. As she spoke, She placed copies of the few documents she had managed to photograph with her phone before being fired on the table. Patricia listened attentively, making occasional notes, her professional face rarely betraying emotion. When Iris finished, the lawyer remained silent for a few moments, mentally organizing the information. "What we have here," she finally said, "are very strong indications, but not enough concrete evidence for a solid court case. The document photographs are partial. The note could be contested, and your word, unfortunately, would be pitted against that of a man with the best lawyers in the country." Iris's heart sank. "So we can't do anything?" "I didn't say that," Patricia corrected, a determined glint appearing in her eyes. "I said we need more. Dr. Victoria's report on the absence of a neurological condition will be crucial. But what would really turn the tide would be—" "The recorder in the Blue Bear," Iris completed. "Exactly. And Raphael's own voice if he can speak." "He can," Iris assured. "I'm sure of it. Raphael is slowly regaining his voice when he manages to avoid the medications." Patricia nodded, closing her folder. "I will prepare a petition for the juvenile court, requesting an urgent investigation. Normally it would take weeks to be reviewed, but I have contacts who can expedite the process, especially if we mention the possibility of the boy's imminent international transfer." "And in the meantime?" Iris asked, worried. "In the meantime," Patricia replied with determination, "we need that recorder." Back at the charity event, Raphael observed the room with heightened attention. Years of forced silence had sharpened his observational skills. He saw beyond social masks, noticed small revealing gestures, and picked up fragments of conversations that no one imagined he could understand. He saw his father speak privately with Dr. Maurice in a corner, checking his watch impatiently. He noticed the man in the grey suit, who had never been introduced to him but who regularly appeared at the mansion for private meetings, now discreetly handing an envelope to Caroline, the lawyer. He noticed how Teresa, the nurse, mixed something into a glass of juice that would certainly be offered to him later, and he saw an opportunity when Bernard was called to the stage to give his speech. With deliberately slow steps, as expected from someone with his supposed condition, Raphael approached the table where Dr. Victoria was seated. He stopped beside her, as if merely wandering aimlessly through the room. "Raphael, dear," the doctor said aloud, for anyone who might be watching, "would you like to sit with us for a bit?" Without waiting for a response, after all, no one expected him to respond, she pulled up a chair beside him. Under the tablecloth that draped to the floor, her hand quickly slid into the boy's jacket pocket, depositing a small object. Raphael felt the weight of the flash drive in his pocket, the device the doctor wanted him to find. With almost imperceptible movements, his own hand dipped into the inner jacket pocket, from which he retrieved a small object, the miniature Blue Bear, a keychain that contained the tiny recorder. With the same discretion, he passed it to the doctor's hand under the table. The exchange lasted seconds. No one in the room noticed anything beyond a special boy sitting momentarily beside a compassionate doctor. "It's a pleasure to have you with us. Raphael," Dr. Victoria continued, maintaining appearances, "your father is doing a wonderful job on stage, isn't he?" On stage, Bernard spoke emotionally, and that is why the Silent Voices Foundation has been my personal mission. When I look at my son, I see not only the challenges he faces, but the potential to help thousands of other children throughout America. Raphael watched his father with a neutral expression, but inside, he felt a storm of emotions, anger, sadness, hope. Dr. Victoria now had the recorder with all the evidence he had patiently collected for months, and he had a flash drive whose contents he didn't know, but which was certainly part of the plan to save him. When Teresa, the nurse, finally approached with the glass of juice, Raphael accepted it obediently. But while everyone watched Bernard's emotional speech, the boy discreetly poured the liquid into the decorative plant next to his chair. That night, for the first time, he would sleep completely free of sedatives. The next day, Dr. Victoria, Iris, and Patricia met in the lawyer's private office. The contents of the recorder were even more impactful than they expected. In addition to Raphael's clear voice explaining his situation, there were incriminating recordings of conversations between Bernard, Caroline, and various employees detailing the foundation's fraud scheme, the false treatments, and, most alarmingly, plans for Raphael's long-term institutionalization in a private clinic in Switzerland. "My God," Iris whispered, tears in her eyes after hearing Raphael's voice for the first time in years. "He did it. That brave boy really did it." "This, along with Dr. Victoria's medical reports, forms a solid basis for our petition," Patricia declared, with determination. "I will file everything today, with a request for maximum urgency." "How long until we get a decision?" Dr. Victoria asked, worried. "Normally days or weeks," Patricia replied, frowning. "But I have contacts in the district attorney's office who can speed up the process. The problem is that we also need to be cautious. If Bernard suspects any legal movement, he might rush to leave the country with Raphael. And what should Raphael do in the meantime?" Iris asked. "He's alone in that house, vulnerable. The flash drive I gave him contains instructions," Dr. Victoria explained, "and a secure messaging app connected to a prepaid cell phone I left in the dollhouse in the garden during my last visit to the mansion. If Raphael can access it, we'll be able to communicate." The three women exchanged glances, each aware of the risks involved in the plan. They were challenging one of the most powerful men in the country, putting their own reputations and careers on the line. But the image of Raphael, trapped in forced silence for years, gave them the courage needed to move forward. "There's one more thing," Patricia said hesitantly. "We need to consider the possibility of public exposure." "What do you mean?" Iris asked. "If we face obstacles in the judicial system, our last option might be to take the case to the press," the lawyer explained. "I have contacts with an investigative journalist at the New York Times, Gabrielle Mason. She has already published several articles on corruption in charitable foundations." "Wouldn't that put Raphael at even greater risk?" Iris questioned, worried. "It's a calculated risk," Patricia replied. "Public exposure would create pressure on the authorities and make it difficult for Bernard to act in the shadows. But we will only resort to this if it's absolutely necessary." That same afternoon, at the Alcott mansion, Raphael sat in front of the computer in his room, seemingly watching an educational documentary approved by his father. In reality, he had discreetly connected the flash drive and accessed Dr. Victoria's instructions. With a pounding heart, he read the detailed plan for his liberation. The file explained the judicial petition, the dollhouse in the garden where he would find a cell phone, and how he should continue pretending to take the medications. There was also a password for an encrypted messaging app and emergency contacts. The last instruction was clear: be prepared. When the moment comes, you will need to be brave and do something you haven't done in a long time. Speak. Raphael looked out the window at the blue Los Angeles sky that stretched beyond the mansion walls. In a few days, his transfer to Switzerland was scheduled. It was a race against time. With renewed determination, he deleted the files from the flash drive as instructed and hid it again. Then he resumed his usual expression of passivity, the mask he had learned to wear so well over the years. But inside, something had fundamentally changed. The voice that had been silenced for so long was now growing stronger, preparing for the moment it would finally be heard. That night, as the rain fell over Los Angeles, 4 people in different parts of the city prepared for the battle to come, a silent battle for truth, for justice, and for the freedom of a boy who, against all odds, refused to remain silent. The rain that had started the previous night had turned into a relentless storm lashing Los Angeles. In the early hours of the morning, as the city awoke under the gray sky, Patricia Miller strode through the corridors of Manhattan Civil Court with determined steps, carrying a bulky folder under her arm. "I need to speak with Judge Redmond urgently," she told the secretary, who greeted her with a surprised expression at the early hour. "Ms. Miller, the judge doesn't begin appointments until 9 a.m., the woman replied, checking the clock, which read 7:30 a.m. "It's a case of child protection in imminent danger," Patricia insisted. "I'm sure Judge Redmond will understand the urgency when he knows what it's about." 15 minutes later, she was in the chambers of Judge Henry Redmond, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a serious expression, known for his unwavering integrity in cases involving children. "An accusation against Bernard Alcott?" the judge questioned, frowning as he leafed through the presented documents. "This is extremely serious, Counselor. Do you realize the power and influence of this man?" "I am fully aware, Your Honor," Patricia replied firmly. "That is precisely why I am here. This case requires someone with the courage to confront that power. The documents speak for themselves. The judge carefully examined Dr. Victoria's medical reports, the transcripts of Raphael's recordings, the photographs of the Foundation's documents, and Iris's detailed testimony. "This is disturbing," he finally admitted, removing his glasses and rubbing his tired eyes. "But I must be frank with you. The evidence is circumstantial. Strong but circumstantial. Any competent legal team would argue that the former employee has motives for revenge, that the medical report is inconclusive, that the recordings could be manipulated." "And what about the boy's own voice?" Patricia questioned. Raphael recorded his own testimony. "Without independent verification of authenticity," the judge pondered. "Understand, I'm not saying I don't believe it. I'm analyzing how this would be received legally." Patricia leaned forward, her voice filled with urgency. "Your Honor, in 3 days, Raphael will be taken to a clinic in Switzerland. If that happens, we will lose any chance to properly investigate this case. All I ask for is a temporary injunction, an independent medical evaluation, and the temporary suspension of any international travel until the facts are ascertained." The judge reflected for long moments. "I will grant the injunction," he finally decided. "But bear in mind that Alcott will contest this with every resource at his disposal." "That's all we need, a chance to prove the truth," Patricia replied, with visible relief. Meanwhile, at the Alcott mansion, routine continued seemingly normal, but with an underlying tension that few perceived. Raphael, more alert than ever, thanks to his self-imposed reduction of medications, noticed the signs of unusual agitation: closed-door meetings, hushed phone calls, the constant presence of Caroline, the lawyer, who usually only appeared for specific events. During breakfast, his father casually announced, "Raphael, I had to move up our trip to the clinic. We'll leave tomorrow night, not Friday as planned." The boy's heart raced, but he maintained the neutral expression he had perfected over the years. He knew what that meant. Somehow his father suspected something was happening. The plan was at risk. As soon as he was alone, Raphael took advantage of the 20 minutes he had managed to deactivate the surveillance camera and, with quick movements, went down to the garden, heading for the old dollhouse. There, exactly where Dr. Victoria had promised, he found the cell phone hidden in a false compartment under the small wooden floor. With trembling fingers, he typed the password and accessed the encrypted messaging app. He sent an urgent text. "Trip moved up to tomorrow night. He knows something." In the small public defender's office, the alert arrived as Patricia and Iris discussed the next steps. "My God, we need to act now," Iris exclaimed, reading the message. "They're going to run away with the boy." "The injunction should be issued by the end of the day," Patricia explained, trying to remain calm. "As soon as it's issued, the federal police will be notified to prevent any attempt to leave the country with Raphael." "What if it's too late?" Iris questioned, distressed. Patricia hesitated only a moment. "Then we activate our Plan B. I've already contacted Gabrielle Mason, the journalist. She's on standby." Dr. Victoria, who was following the conversation via video call from her office, intervened. "If Bernard is moving up the trip, it's because someone alerted him about the investigation. We have a leak. Or he has contacts in the judicial system," Patricia suggested grimly. "It wouldn't be the first time I've seen that happen in cases involving powerful people." The tension was palpable. They were in a race against time, and the odds did not look favorable. That afternoon, as the rain continued to fall over the city, Patricia anxiously awaited the notification of the injunction in her office. The phone rang. It was her contact at the court clerk's office. "Ms. Miller, we have a problem. The request is encountering bureaucratic resistance. Apparently some stamps and signatures are missing to validate the medical documentation presented." "That's absurd," Patricia protested. "The documents are all in order." "I know," the contact replied in a low voice. "But it seems someone is deliberately creating obstacles. It's not official, but I heard there were calls from someone influential." When she hung up, Patricia felt the weight of reality. They were facing not just a powerful man, but an entire system that often bowed to power and influence. "We need Plan B," she decided. "Now." As Patricia contacted Gabrielle Mason to set the public exposure strategy in motion, a silent drama unfolded at the Alcott mansion. Raphael, having returned from the dollhouse, found Dr. Maurice waiting in his room with a grim expression. "Raphael," the doctor said, closing the door carefully. "I've noticed some anomalies in your recent reactions. Your condition seems inconsistent." The boy remained impassive, though his heart was pounding. "I'm going to increase your dosage from now on," the doctor continued, preparing a syringe, "to ensure you're comfortable during the trip." Raphael knew what that meant. More sedatives, more mental confusion, fewer chances to fight or escape. When the doctor approached with the syringe, he made a desperate decision. With an abrupt movement that surprised them both, he knocked a glass of water onto the doctor's pants. "What?" Dr. Maurice exclaimed, instinctively backing away. Raphael pointed to the bathroom, making apologetic gestures as expected of someone with his supposed condition. The doctor hesitated, then nodded, placing the syringe on the table to clean himself. "Don't move," he ordered, entering the bathroom. The moment the door closed, Raphael acted quickly. He grabbed the syringe and emptied it into the plant pot next to the bed, replacing the liquid with water from the pitcher. When the doctor returned, everything looked exactly as before. The injection was administered without the doctor suspecting the switch. Raphael feigned the expected effects: heavy eyes, slower movements, while internally remaining perfectly lucid. At the New York Times newsroom, Gabrielle Mason listened attentively as Patricia and Iris presented the evidence they had gathered. "It's an explosive story," the journalist commented, examining the documents. "But we need to be extremely careful. We're talking about serious accusations against a widely admired public figure." "We have the proof," Patricia insisted. "The recordings, the medical reports, the Foundation's documents." "And we need to act quickly," Iris added. "They intend to take Raphael out of the country tomorrow night." Gabrielle nodded thoughtfully. "I can prepare the article for immediate digital publication, but I need a few hours to independently verify some details. Responsible journalism demands that." "How much time exactly?" Patricia pressed. "By the end of today," the journalist promised. "If everything checks out, we'll publish at 8 p.m., in time for tomorrow's print edition and with immediate digital reach." As the hours slowly passed, each participant in this drama played their part in preparing for the final confrontation. Dr. Victoria compiled additional medical reports and contacted respected colleagues to back her conclusions. Patricia continued to push for speed in the judicial process, despite the obstacles. Iris gathered other former mansion employees willing to testify about suspicious behaviors they had witnessed. At the mansion, preparations for departure were accelerating. Suitcases were packed, documents organized, staff instructed about the prolonged absence. "Everything is arranged for our arrival in Zurich," Caroline informed Bernard in his office. "The clinic is prepared with all the discretion you requested." "Excellent," he replied, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. "And what about the funds?" "Transfers completed," the lawyer assured. "The accounts in the Cayman Islands are secure and inaccessible to any American investigation." "And that meddling former employee?" "Iris?" Caroline smiled coldly. "We are monitoring her movements. She was at the court today with a public defender. Our contacts are ensuring that any process is suitably delayed." Bernard nodded, satisfied. "We always knew she would be a problem. I should have dismissed her years ago." "Don't worry," Caroline reassured him. "In 24 hours, you and Raphael will be out of the country, and she won't be able to do anything about it." What they didn't know was that, at that exact moment, Gabrielle Mason was finalizing her explosive article, having independently confirmed several of the facts presented. The title was direct and impactful: "The Forced Silence, the Truth Behind the Silent Voices Foundation." In Iris's small apartment, the group gathered for the final preparations. The cell phone vibrated with a message from Raphael. "Bags packed. Heard plans, departure tomorrow 7 p.m., private jet, JFK Airport." "We have to act before then," Patricia declared, determined. "The article will be published at 8 p.m. tonight," Iris reminded them. "It will be too late." "Not necessarily," Dr. Victoria intervened. "As soon as the article is published, it will be impossible for them to discreetly leave the country with Raphael. Public attention will be intense. Unless they move up the trip again, Patricia pondered. Bernard has the resources for that. A tense silence hung over the group. Every passing minute was precious, and Raphael's fate depended on the decisions they made in the next few hours. It was Iris who finally verbalized what everyone was thinking. "We need a plan to get into the mansion, tonight." Their gazes met, surprised, apprehensive, but determined. What she suggested was risky, possibly illegal, but perhaps their only real chance to save Raphael. "I have an idea," Dr. Victoria said slowly. "As a doctor, I can request an urgent home visit, citing professional concern for Raphael's health after observing him at the event." "They'll refuse," Patricia objected. "Not if I have a court order for a medical evaluation," the doctor replied. "Judge Redmond can issue that immediately, even without the full injunction. It's a simpler procedure, focused solely on the boy's health." "What about me?" Iris asked. "I need to be there too." "Impossible," Patricia said. "You're forbidden to approach the mansion. Unless," Dr. Victoria began, an idea forming in her mind, "unless you come as my medical assistant, with a uniform, altered badge, different hair, just to get in." It was risky, improvised, desperate, but also the best chance they had. "I'm contacting Judge Redmond right now," Patricia decided, picking up the phone. "In the meantime, prepare everything you need for tonight." As the sun set over Los Angeles, bringing a brief respite after the day's storm, the plan was in motion. In a few hours, the final confrontation would begin, a confrontation for truth, for justice, and for the future of a boy who had spent years trapped in forced silence. In the mansion, Raphael looked out his bedroom window, watching the last lights of day. Something told him this would be his last night in that gilded cage. For better or worse, the silence was about to be definitively broken. Night fell over Los Angeles as Dr. Victoria's car pulled up to the imposing gates of the Alcott mansion. Beside her, almost unrecognizable with her hair tucked under a medical cap, thick-rimmed glasses, and a white uniform, sat Iris. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it wanted to escape her chest. "Stay calm," Dr. Victoria murmured, adjusting the stethoscope around her neck. "Remember, you are Marcia Stone, my technical assistant, and you are here only to record the procedures." Iris nodded, clutching the folder of documents to her chest. Inside it, in addition to medical forms, was the court order signed by Judge Redmond, authorizing an independent medical evaluation of Raphael Alcott due to founded concerns about his well-being and actual medical condition. Over the intercom, Dr. Victoria identified herself in a professional voice. "Dr. Victoria Peterson, pediatric neurologist, for an urgent medical evaluation of Raphael Alcott. I have judicial authorization." There was a long pause, followed by the security guard's voice. "Please wait a moment." 5 tense minutes passed before the gates finally opened. As the car drove up the long driveway of the mansion, Iris observed the lights on in several windows, the unusual movement of staff, clear signs of the imminent departure preparations. At the main entrance, they were greeted by Caroline, the lawyer, whose expression fluctuated between ill-concealed irritation and false cordiality. "Dr. Peterson, this is completely irregular," she protested, examining the court order with critical eyes. "Mr. Alcott is extremely busy with unpostponable commitments, and Raphael is already preparing for bed." "I regret the inconvenience," Dr. Victoria replied with professional firmness, "but as you can see, the order is quite clear. An independent medical evaluation today. If you prefer to contest it, we can call a court officer to accompany the procedure." The bluff worked. Caroline retreated, though her expression made it clear that the situation would not end there. "This way, then. Raphael is in his room. Dr. Maurice is with him and will accompany the entire procedure." "Naturally," Dr. Victoria agreed, exchanging a quick glance with Iris. The personal doctor's presence complicated things, but they had no choice. As they ascended the stairs, Iris kept her face partially hidden by the documents she pretended to consult. Every corner of the house brought back memories of the years she had spent there, silently observing the lie being built around Raphael. In the corridor, they found Bernard rushing out of his office. His gaze fell first on Dr. Victoria, with evident displeasure, and then slid to the assistant beside her. For a terrible moment, Iris feared being recognized, but the businessman merely frowned briefly before addressing the doctor. "Dr. Peterson, this is an invasion of privacy," he declared without preamble. "My lawyer is already preparing a challenge to this absurd order." "I'm sorry you feel that way, Mr. Alcott," she replied calmly. "I am merely fulfilling my professional duty. The evaluation will not take more than 30 minutes. Bernard seemed about to argue, but something on his phone caught his attention. He quickly read a message and his expression turned alarmed. "I have an urgent matter to resolve," he said abruptly. "Caroline will accompany the procedure along with Dr. Maurice, and I want a full report as soon as it's finished." With that, he hurried down the stairs, speaking on the phone in a low, tense voice. "This way," Caroline indicated, leading them to Raphael's room. The room was exactly as Iris remembered, spacious, luxurious but with something impersonal, like a hospital room disguised as a child's suite. Raphael was sitting on the bed, with Dr. Maurice beside him, checking some medical equipment. The boy looked up as they entered, and for a brief instant Iris saw recognition in his gaze upon seeing her, quickly masked by his usual neutral expression. "Dr. Victoria," Dr. Maurice greeted coldly. "This is highly irregular. Raphael has just received his night medication and needs to rest." "I understand your concern, Doctor," she replied, approaching Raphael. "I will be brief and careful." Over the next 20 minutes, Dr. Victoria conducted a series of basic neurological tests, commenting aloud for Iris to record her observations. She checked reflexes, responses to visual and auditory stimuli, motor coordination, all clearly indicating that Raphael showed no signs of the rare neurological syndrome that supposedly afflicted him. "His pupillary reflexes are perfectly normal," she observed, turning off the small flashlight, "and his response to auditory stimuli is immediate and precise." "These are temporary fluctuations common in his condition," Dr. Maurice intervened, visibly tense. "As I explained in my reports, the syndrome presents periods of apparent improvement, followed by severe regressions." Dr. Victoria nodded professionally, then turned to Raphael. "Raphael, do you understand what I am saying now?" The boy looked at her, then at Dr. Maurice, and then nodded slightly. "Can you point to the window, please?" Raphael promptly obeyed. "Interesting," Dr. Victoria commented. "Now I need to check his vital signs." Leaning over the boy, she positioned herself so that her body blocked Dr. Maurice's and Caroline's view. In that brief moment, she quickly whispered to Raphael, "We are here to help. Be prepared." The boy's gaze met hers, a spark of hope shining in his eyes. Meanwhile, on the ground floor of the mansion, Bernard faced an unexpected crisis. The call he had received was from his contact at the newspaper, alerting him that the New York Times was about to publish, in less than an hour, an explosive article about the Silent Voices Foundation, with serious accusations of fraud and child abuse against Raphael. "How did you let this happen?" he roared into the phone. "I thought we had these situations under control." He quickly convened an emergency teleconference with his main lawyers and press advisors. A damage control strategy was being hastily assembled. In Raphael's room, the medical evaluation was coming to an end. Dr. Victoria put away her equipment, maintaining a neutral professional expression that did not reveal her alarming discoveries. No signs of the supposed syndrome, but clear indications of prolonged sedation and inappropriate psychiatric medication. "I have concluded my evaluation," she announced. "I will need to prepare a detailed report for the judge." "Naturally," Caroline replied coldly. "I'm sure it will confirm Dr. Maurice's previous diagnoses." "My report will be based strictly on objective medical evidence," Dr. Victoria replied, with a significant look at Raphael. At that moment, an unexpected commotion erupted downstairs. Raised voices, hurried footsteps, the sound of doors opening. Caroline frowned, checking her phone. "What's going on down there?" The answer came in the form of Bernard bursting into the room, his face red with fury. "It's over. The Times published the article early. It's all over the internet." "What?" Caroline exclaimed, grabbing her own cell phone. Dr. Victoria and Iris exchanged quick glances. Gabrielle Mason had moved up the publication, probably sensing the movements to take Raphael out of the country. "We need to get out of here now," Bernard ordered, addressing Raphael. We're going to the airport immediately. The jet is ready. That would be a direct violation of the court order prohibiting the minor from leaving the country during the investigation, Dr. Victoria intervened, maintaining professional calm though her heart pounded. What court order? Bernard questioned, confused. The one that must be being delivered at this very moment, she replied, checking her watch. Part of the same process that authorized my medical evaluation today. As if to confirm her words, they heard new voices downstairs, including what sounded like a court officer announcing himself at the entrance. Chaos erupted in the room. Bernard cursed. Caroline spoke frantically on the phone with other lawyers. Dr. Maurice looked in panic at the medical equipment that could incriminate him. No one was paying attention to Raphael, except Iris. With a meaningful look, she approached the bed, whispering, "Now, Raphael." "It's time," the boy understood. As the adults argued agitatedly, he silently rose from the bed. Years of observation had taught him how to move unnoticed, how to disappear in plain sight when necessary. In the corridor, they found Patricia ascending the stairs, accompanied by a court officer and 2 federal police officers. The lawyer smiled briefly upon seeing Iris and Raphael. "Bernard Alcott?" The officer called loudly, entering the room. "I have here a court order prohibiting the minor Raphael Alcott from leaving national territory and mandating his immediate protection under temporary state custody until the conclusion of investigations into child abuse and fraud." "This is absurd," Bernard exploded. "My son has a serious medical condition. We're on our way to specialized treatment." "Regarding that, Mr. Alcott," Dr. Victoria intervened, her voice clear and firm, "my preliminary medical evaluation found no evidence of the alleged neurological syndrome. On the contrary, I found signs consistent with prolonged sedation and inappropriate use of psychotropic medications." A stunned silence fell over the room. It was at that moment that all attention turned to Raphael, who stood beside Iris in the corridor, observing the scene. "Raphael, come here," Bernard ordered, extending his hand. "Tell them. Well, show them your condition." But Raphael did not move toward his father. Instead, he took a step forward and, to the shock of everyone, except those who already knew the truth, spoke for the first time in public after years. "My name is Raphael Alcott," he said, his voice clear and firm, despite a slight nervous tremor. "I am not sick. I never was. My father kept me drugged for years to pretend I had a rare syndrome. He used my supposed condition to raise millions for the foundation, money that was never used to help sick children." The entire room seemed to freeze. Dr. Maurice dropped the instruments he was holding. Caroline visibly paled. And Bernard, for the first time in years, was genuinely speechless, his face a mask of horror as he realized his empire of lies was crumbling before his eyes. "It's a setup," he finally managed to stammer. "He's been manipulated. He's confused by the medications." "I am not confused," Raphael continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. "I stopped taking the medicine days ago. I am more lucid than ever, and I have proof." With steady hands, he pulled out the flash drive Dr. Victoria had given him, now containing copies of all the recordings he had made over the months, including incriminating conversations between his father, Caroline, and Dr. Maurice. "Here is the evidence," he said, handing the device to the court officer. "Recordings of conversations about maintaining the charade, documents about money transfers to offshore accounts, falsified medical reports." The events that followed happened in quick succession. Bernard, Caroline, and Dr. Maurice were formally notified of the investigation against them. The federal police took control of the mansion, isolating the office and computers as potential sources of evidence. Journalists began to gather at the gates, alerted by the New York Times bombshell publication. Amidst the turmoil, Raphael remained surprisingly calm, as if an enormous weight had been lifted from his shoulders. When a social worker approached to explain that he would need to undergo full medical examinations and temporarily be under state protection, the boy asked only one question. "Can Mrs. Iris stay with me?" A few weeks later, a special hearing was held at Manhattan Civil Court. The room was packed. Journalists, representatives from child protection NGOs, doctors, lawyers, and curious onlookers following the case that had shocked the country. Bernard Alcott, once celebrated as an example of a humanitarian businessman and devoted father, now faced serious charges: fraud, child abuse, falsification of medical documents, embezzlement of charitable foundation funds, and currency evasion. Beside him, Caroline and Dr. Maurice stood as accomplices. Raphael, now officially under Iris's temporary guardianship, appointed his provisional legal guardian. After a rigorous evaluation by the juvenile court, gave his testimony with impressive eloquence for a boy his age. "My father once told me that some people are born to be seen, others to be heard, and some to remain silent," he declared, his voice echoing in the silent room. "He chose silence for me because it served his purposes. But now I choose to speak, not just for myself, but for all children whose voices are ignored or silenced." His testimony, along with the material evidence, independent medical reports, and documents recovered from the foundation, formed an irrefutable case. The sentence, when it came, was severe. Bernard received penalties for multiple crimes, with multi-million-dollar compensation for the families of children who should have benefited from the foundation. The assets of the Silent Voices Foundation were confiscated and, by judicial order, transferred to a new organization, the New Voices Foundation, which would be administered by an independent board, with Iris as one of the directors. Its mission: to provide effective support to children with real disabilities and their families. For Raphael, the road ahead would be one of reconstruction. The transition from a life of isolation and forced silence to normalcy would not be easy, but he now had a genuine support network. Iris, who loved him like the son she never had. Dr. Victoria, who oversaw his physical and emotional recovery. Patricia, who ensured his rights were always protected. And new friends at the regular school he now attended. 6 months after the hearing that changed his life, Raphael participated in a documentary produced by PBS about his case. In the closing, looking directly into the camera with clear eyes and a firm voice, he left a message that would resonate for a long time. "For years, I lived in silence, not because I couldn't speak, but because they wouldn't let me. I learned that silence can be both a prison and a weapon. It depends on who controls it. Today, I use my voice to say that no one has the right to silence the truth. Every child deserves to be heard. Every story deserves to be told. Every truth deserves to come to light. Because in the end, it is the truth that sets us free. And it is our voices that build a more just world." The camera slowly pulled back, showing Raphael on the balcony of the new home where he lived with Iris, a simple but cozy apartment in Greenwich Village. Beside him, a digital recorder rested on the table, no longer a tool of secret resistance, but a symbol of the power of truth and persistence. In his room, a bookshelf displayed trophies from school oratory and debate competitions. Ironically, the boy who had been silenced for years had discovered a natural talent for communication and the use of words. And on his study desk, an open notebook showed the beginning of a book he was writing, The Broken Silence, My Story. On the streets of Los Angeles, life continued its course. New scandals replaced old ones in the headlines. New celebrities rose and fell. But for those who closely followed Raphael Alcott's saga, something had fundamentally changed. The understanding that appearances can hide painful truths, that the most important voices are often those that struggle to be heard. And for Raphael, every word spoken, every sentence written, every story told was a victory over the silence they once tried to impose on him, a daily affirmation that his voice, like that of any human being, deserved to be heard. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that Raphael and Iris's journey has deeply touched your hearts. A story that reminds us of the transformative power of truth and the importance of giving a voice to those who have been silenced. For more emotional narratives like this, we have a special playlist with other stories from across America that will move you from beginning to end. Find it by clicking here. If this story stirred your emotions, be sure to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. And tell us in the comments, what moment in this story touched your heart the most? We look forward to reading your impressions.